Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 52 of the F and Growth live stream. I'm here with Joe Krug. As always, today we're going to talk about why we need to stop calling Webflow easy. This conversation that started from a tweet. I teased it last episode, and it kind of went a little crazy in the Twitter sphere. So we're going to talk about the conversation that started. We've seen this conversation happen in other no-code spaces, and so we thought it was relevant to bring it to you all. But you know, before we get too far into this thing, let's F and grow. Okay, what's up, Joe?
Hello. I'm excited about this episode from a tweet. Not easy. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. Things I've had problems with, calling things too easy. So yeah, I'm excited for this episode. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's interesting how some of these things take off on the web, and you never know. This was like a random thought. I literally tweeted it like 20 minutes before the stream last week. It was just one of those fleeting thoughts that I had. I think I had seen like over the last couple of days, a few people just kind of posting, it's so easy to build Webflow. I just built a site in like 3 minutes, like, oh my God, I can't believe this, that, or the other. And I'm like, okay, it is amazing. I understand that energy. I have probably been guilty of this myself, right? Like, I think that's the key here is to talk, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're all a little guilty of this, but why we should maybe think about not calling it easy as we move forward. We're going to talk all about the complexity that you need with Webflow and its growing complexity, and then how that plays into just, the growing ecosystem. So let's say what's up to everybody who's in the comments here. There's a bunch of folks with us. Hello. How many we got today right now? So there are 36 of you at the start of this. Say hi in the comments. We got Michael Collins in the house. Magdalena's in the house. Scott Humphrey is here. What's up, Scott Humphrey? Rohan is here. Grace Walker. What's up, Grace? Richard. Saber. Jay Poucher. What's up, Kayla Williams? Shout out to Kayla Williams. You will come up later in the stream today. Fernando Comment. Hello. Ezekiel's in the house. Hans. What's up, Hans? Victoria. Hola, Victoria. De Mexico. What's up? New team and community member over there. So what's up to Victoria? Designer Wisdom. Gabe is in the house. What's up, Andres? Scott Humphrey. What's up? Oh, he said his Finsweet cap turned up this week. Love it. Awesome.
Nice.
Love to hear that. Mark Brutus is in the house with a real Shane Grady. Please stand up. Is here with us today. Okay. All right. So let's get into, we've got a couple things like we do usually. We've got a couple events, couple announcements, things that we want to get through. And then if you haven't noticed yet, there's a cool update to the Finsweet extension. We're going to cover that just a little bit before we get into the conversation here. So let's jump right into that at first here. Events. Reloom, the guys from Reloom, again, you've seen them all over the Webflow ecosystem. They're popping up again. They're going to be on the Webflow show with Keith Armstrong. I think Grace and Melissa are also part of that Twitter Spaces. For sure, check them out. Oh, you know what? Hang on, let's do this because I got visuals for this, man. You know, we are professionals, y'all. Okay, and I just pinned the notes. So if anybody wants the links, anything that we talk about, updates, everything's in the show notes. It's pinned at the top of the comments there. Go ahead and jump in there. It's literally a Notion doc. You can run along, follow along with us, and see everything that we're talking about. So anyway, shout out to Keith and what they're doing with these Twitter Spaces, these Webflow shows. Much love to them. It's always cool seeing people do stuff in the community. The next thing we've got coming up is our show and tell this coming Monday. These are cool events, open to anyone. Show up and share something you've built in Webflow, something you've learned, a project you've built. I don't know, anything cool. You get 5 minutes on the stage plus a little follow-up time for Q&A. So it's always a lot of fun. We're excited about that upcoming event. You can learn more about that. Go ahead.
I have a question about that one.
Yeah.
Can I come to this for feedback? Maybe I just launched a site or I'm about to launch a site. Can I go to this event and get people's opinions on how to take it to the next level or finish it or something like that?
Yeah, 100%. So let me kind of zoom in here. Have you found a new tool that makes Webflow workflow easier? Have you just finished a project that you want more people to see? Are you kicking off a Webflow focused product and looking for community feedback? Have you recently implemented a new Webflow interaction or integration and just kind of want to show off a little bit? Is there something cool you believe every Webflow fan should know about, or an idea or question? So even if you want to ask a question, like literally this is just your, like we're just creating a stage. You got 5 minutes, share whatever thoughts you want. Obviously Webflow focus, so don't come up and try to read your spoken word. That's not the setting for that. Although we're down if we want to hold a different kind of open mic. So yeah, 5 minutes, you get a little bit of time for feedback. We're asking people to RSVP ahead of time just so we can kind of get a head count. But all the setup happens at the event. So you don't have to decide whether you're sharing something now. We just open that registration on the day of, and it kind of happens randomly. So you don't know what time you're going to be presenting. You just show up, everyone signs up, we get the roster, and we go from there. So cool event. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. Joe, you want to talk a little bit about this global open house?
Global Open House, March 24th. Save the date. It's going to be big. You're going to want to be there. You won't want to have work on the side of the Global Open House Day. We did it last year. We helped organize all of the chapter organizers of Webflow meetup groups. And together we did this really awesome event. It was like an open house just for people in Webflow. And this is an event that has not been here in the past. So now we're doing year 2. This is going to be awesome. And look at this space here as we're sharing on the screen. You create a little avatar and you are able to walk around our virtual Webflow community room. Look at this. Wow. I haven't even seen this yet. This looks awesome.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to be in this world.
It's going to be wild.
Love it.
We're working with the community again. We're working with a number of different groups around the area. You can see we're going to allow people to set up little teleportation zones to get to their little community. We've got a ton of stuff coming with this. It's going to be amazing. Last year, it was a blowout event. We had something like 220 people in the auditorium when we kicked it off. We had something like 530 plus come through over the course of the event. We think this year is going to be much bigger and wilder. So come, if you're looking to, listen, if you run a group in the Webflow world, if you're looking to start a group in the Webflow world, if you want to plug into a group in the Webflow world, this is the place. This is the place to come and meet all the people who are doing different things in the community, people who run different meetup groups, and not just your, top 5, the things you hear from everywhere, right? Like all the big podcasts, all the big YouTubers, vloggers, whatever. No, this is like the little local meetup over here with 30, 40 people that's in Germany that's doing some cool things. This is the 10 people in Israel that are meeting and doing something interesting over here, or in Italy, or all over. And so this is just one of those opportunities to showcase what's happening across this community, people that maybe don't necessarily get this level of visibility. So we have a lot of fun with that, and we're excited again about the second year for this event. So yeah, looking forward to that. Be sure you don't miss it. We'll release the time. We don't know the exact time. We're thinking it's probably going to kick off around the same time of the stream, but we'll get to that. Okay. So that's it for events. I think now we're into announcements. Yeah, Joe, do you want to give a tease of what's coming up Thursday?
Yes, Thursday we are releasing a written article for attributes explaining why we went with form elements for building your filter UI. When we released attributes, one of the biggest comments was, can I use a div? Can I use a link block? Can I use a button to manage my filtering user interface? And the answer is no. We built this with forms in mind. We built it very specifically with forms in mind. And this article is going to explain that thought process. Why forms are used to communicate and how it affects accessibility. This is a really cool post dropping Thursday. And I think on Thursday, we'll go over it. So definitely come here on Thursday. We'll do a Learn It Live and we'll review this article and really get to that next level of understanding form elements with attributes.
Okay. We have some confusion here. We've got Simon and Tito coming. We're doing Figma to client first on Thursday.
Great.
So we'll definitely release that article, but the Learn It Live for that will probably be the following week or another episode, just to clarify on that.
And to clarify here, we don't need a full episode on it. I think it's just a 5 minutes.
Got it.
Hey, check this out. Look at these 3 categories and look how form elements win
Great.
in every category.
Perfect.
So yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to have a lot more of this type of content coming. So this is like the icing on the cake of some really cool stuff from the content realm that we'll release over the next couple weeks. I think a lot of you will be excited to see some of those deep dives that we do. This Thursday, though, for the Learn It Live, we're going to get hands-on with taking Figma to client first. Webflows just put this whole big Figma release out in Figma to Webflow kind of thing. So we've also found out, Joe and I last episode, that we have all these Figma files that are going viral on Figma. And so we're going to talk with Simon, who is run our boot camps, and Tito Solano, who's a Clone Comp champ and also a recent boot camp grad, about the process of looking at the Figma file, how do you compile this, and how do you take that into Webflow using client-first system. And so we'll go deep into that. Come check that out Thursday for any details on that. Okay, so let's see. Road to 10K subscribers. Where are we at on 10,000 subscribers? I think we're at like 9,546. Last week we were at like 9,416, something like that. So let's go. 130 this week. We need to get to 10,000 by the end of the month. So come on, y'all gotta buy us some subscribers. Tell your mama to subscribe. I don't know what you got to do. We got to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the month. So let's go. And then the big announcement. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say our extension is growing.
Extension. There you go.
We have 6,000 users now, which is excellent. So this number rises every month. Once you start using it, once you understand what this can do for you, it just becomes part of your workflow. That's what people are telling us. That's what we're seeing internally at Finsweet. So if you don't have Finsweet extension, go check it out. We are at finsweet.com/extension, and we are about to start building new features for this. And before we build the new features, we have a really big update that reorganizes how the extension is displayed to you. And that reorganization is called Candies. Candies will now contain all of the workflow functionalities that we have inside Finsweet extension. So instead of trying to break these into components and functional and what we were trying to break them in before, we thought that these were confusing categories to organize. So now everything is a candy, and we are going to make it clear when we release new candies. We're going to work in sorting and filtering, favoriting, so you're able to really make this as easy to use as possible. Put the candies that you like to work with right in front of you. So a bit of branding there, a bit of fun with the Finsweet candies. We're really excited for this because we have a lot more to launch. And we realized the past organization just wasn't working. Raymmar, did I miss anything with candies here?
No, just the reorganization I think makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of stuff in here that's super cool. If you're not familiar with kind of what's going on, I definitely recommend you get this extension and play around with it. The other thing we did was we brought these two to the top. So, we thought these should be first-class citizens in the extension. These are the two kind of core tenets of what we're doing here at Finsweet, client first and attributes. And so we wanted to give them, just the attention they deserve here. This is going to continue to grow. So having this as a first click in the extension is some feedback that we got that we thought was useful. And same thing here with the client first stuff. And we also did this little notification thing here. So we're going to add, if you can see, there's like a little red dot on the screen here. And so when we're live, you get a little red dot. Otherwise, you'll just see the next upcoming event. And if you click on this, it'll bring you out to the live stream. This is going to continue to grow. Whoa. So have loop back there. So get a little bit of, it's just this, let us know as we announce events, as we play around with this extension, as we experiment with what we can do. Let us know what you think of these updates and other stuff coming. Any other thoughts there, Joe?
Yeah, can you click on changelog?
Changelog, yes.
We are taking more seriously how we present unreleased features. Previously, we were keeping them a little bit grayed out, not really clear when they are being worked on or not. So we're going to be more active with this. Our changelog is already linked to GitHub. You're getting the exact updates as we are making them. And then on top, we have unreleased features that we're working on. And now we are actually starting to work on these. I know that some of these have been here since release, but we're actually starting this sprint to work on all of these 4 features this month. So Look out for those. These will all be new candies.
Great. And
Yeah.
okay, anything else about the extension? I think that's super cool. We're going to do pretty soon a
Yeah.
deep dive on this extension. So I think on one of our upcoming Learn It Lives, probably in the next week or two, maybe three, we're going to do another deep dive into this. This extension has changed so much and kind of matured since we first launched it that we probably need to spend some time going through. A lot of this stuff was coming soon. A lot of this stuff wasn't fully, like baked. The cake wasn't fully baked. And now that we've reorganized it, we kind of want to do some new videos for the public. And so expect another full deep dive episode on this extension in the next few weeks. So, okay, moving on from there. I wanted to give a shout out to this client first and Reloom shout out. I think we have mentioned Kayla on the show before, but she's releasing some templates. So check out that link in the show notes there so you can see that. But shout out to Kayla, who's coming fast on the scene, and we appreciate, anytime somebody's sharing valuable assets,
Wow.
especially when they're using client first. So it's a cool website, beautiful colors. Just
Jeez,
funky
that's a
little.
great way to catch somebody's attention. Put those pictures of ice cream.
That's right.
Wow, there's some great graphics on this site.
Yep. And again, it's all built using client first. Kayla, if you haven't, you should for sure submit this to the client first showcase. But anyway, and if you've built anything using client first, be sure to send us a tweet, tag us on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, wherever you can get it to us. Send us a smoke signal, and we'll try to promote it here on the show. So, last announcement before we jump into it is that our podcast is now live. So we've mentioned this a couple times, but the first couple episodes of this podcast are now live on Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Alexa, I guess, uses TuneIn, Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, Castbox, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, all the main platforms. The podcast is now available, and this is kind of fun. I went back and I listened to one of the episodes the other day, kind of in the background. It's super awkward listening to yourself in the past. I don't know what you think, Joe, if you've listened to any of this, but we're going to release an episode a day until we catch up to live, and then we'll go to once a week to match with the show. So any thoughts on the podcast, Joe? Any thoughts on, I know it's been a long time coming, but this is cool to get this in this format.
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited because a lot of people asked for this. There were really a growing number of people saying, hey, I love the content, but I really want to take it in audio. I want to listen to this on the treadmill. I want to listen to this on my run. So now we have this new format, same content. You just don't get to see our faces.
That's
and
right.
I think some people prefer that. So that's great.
Yeah, there will obviously be some parts that don't translate when we do stuff on screen. We'll try to think about that as we move forward. But anyway, we'll take it from there. So, all right, let's get into it. We've got a couple disclaimers today, like we always do. Let's get back to this view. That's enough for announcements and different things today. Let's get right into these disclaimers. Right off the top, easy becomes relative to your skill set, right? So if you're an experienced rock climber and you see a small little cliff, maybe you could scale that without a rope. That's easy. But if you're me, and you walk up to that cliff and you look at this rock, you're like, not a damn thing. I'm just not even gonna, there's not a chance I'm climbing this thing without harnesses and somebody there to coach me and whatever. And so it's not easy for me. And now this rock instructor might say, hey, no big deal. This is super easy. But in reality, it's not, right? This person has spent years developing and honing this skill and learning the craft and learning where they can place their hands and how to position their body and how to maybe use their legs so they're not just using their arms to climb. And so this is, very relative to what we have here is that it becomes based on your skill set, where you've learned. If you've been using Webflow for 10 years, sure, it's easy. But if you're learning, right, if you find me 3 or 4 years ago and I'm in my first month of learning Webflow, I'm racking my brain. I've left projects midway, I've just left frustrated. And if somebody was like, oh, it's so easy, I'm like, it's not easy, right? It's not easy. And so we want to talk about that. So just disclaimer number 1. Joe, do you want to chime in on disclaimer 1 and then take us into disclaimer 2?
Sure. I think it's something that everybody has done at some point in their life. Say that something is easy because they got too good at it. You just improve so much, and you look back and say, wow, I'm so good at this. This is easy. So just keep this in mind every time we talk about this on the show. That's relative to your skill, and you should not You shouldn't have, there shouldn't be a negative feeling around your high skill. And then disclaimer number two, reach out to the community when you get stuck. It's an incredibly helpful community, maybe the most helpful community on the internet, where people are actually willing to help you completely for free on work that you're getting paid for. And that person is just in a Facebook message or a Facebook post or a Twitter post. This is a great way to, to get to that next level. Just reach out, be open about it instead of banging your head on the wall and running away and saying, "Oh, this is so difficult."
Spencer calls it the Webflow rage quit. And
Yes, there we go.
100%.
It is.
I just and the crazy thing was like, you figure something out and maybe you hacked it, right? You just added a bunch of margin to one side. You're like, look, I got it over here. Or, maybe you don't realize like a child relationship, but you still get thing to work. And then later you do something else and you're like, oh, and you break it. And you're like, and then you don't know how to troubleshoot because you don't know. And so you go back and you don't know, you can't see the mistakes. Like maybe you can when you go in, like now something happens. I see something positioning. I see some overflow. I know how to go back and you can trace how it goes and I know how to troubleshoot this. But when you're not, yeah, rage quit is 100%. So Austin is saying, thank you, Finsweet. You have saved me some of my client projects for some complicated things that are not Webflow native. You guys saved me some business. This is also my first live webinar. So shout out to Austin. Awesome. Thanks for being here. And yeah, let's jump into it, Joe.
Audience prompt. We have a question, a poll in the chat. And that question is, what was the hardest thing for you to learn about Webflow? I chose global styles and naming. That was the most difficult for me because I think with box model and CSS positioning, you can really test things out quick, right? You can press all the buttons with an absolute element and like just see what happens on the page. But when you get into the global styles and naming, this is such a deeper concept of project organization, how things work, and this idea of sharing, inheriting styles from classes. So I chose that one. And that is also the most selected one here at 50% of the voters.
Yeah, and I think Young calls it out here. Class name was the hard part for him, but now it feels good with client first. And I think this is why so many people resonate with client first. This is why some of these utility frameworks got a lot of attraction and excitement. And so, yeah, I think this is probably going to end the poll. We can look back at the end of the video. Somebody remind me at the end that we don't close out. We do that all the time. We like make a poll and then we don't look at it at the end. So anyway, we'll look at it at the end and we'll actually close the poll. But I think it's probably going to stay naming. To this day, I still have, issues once in a while where like, you go in, maybe it's a project you worked on a year ago and you need to make a quick update and you're like, ah, shit, how did I do that? And you're like, oh, whatever, combo class. And so like these things still happen. Hopefully it gets better over time, as you get better and more proficient, right? It's less important for me now because I'm not delivering client websites. And so anyway, let's jump into the full run. Oh, let's maybe take a look. There was one other thing we wanted to do here. Let's see. We probably don't need to look at too much of this, but I wanted to take a little bit of time and just remind people this is where it came from. Can we please stop screaming about how easy it is to build with Webflow? Just because you understand Webflow doesn't make it easy, which is what we've talked about. The core parts of this, which is what we're going to talk about next, is why, right? And it's about devaluing the ecosystem, diminishing the value of the work you're doing specifically, and then discouraging the beginners, which is kind of what we talked about. And I wanted to show, actually, this is just, let's see, February 8th, so literally today, this morning, Pablo, build your app in less than 2 hours, build your app for less than 500, red flag, red flag. These types of messages hurt bubble. You could replace that with Webflow more than they help. It's simply not true. So it's the same kind of thing. It's the same concept here. And then here's another one, software engineer of 25 years and do not find Webflow easy. And this was the sentiment throughout. Right. So if we go back to this guy and start looking, I mean, the endless people just kind of saying, so if it wasn't global styles, if it wasn't like maybe interactions, for me, interactions, I think I saw Rohan said that at the beginning, interactions were hard to learn, anything a little bit more complex about interactions. So I don't know, any thoughts here, Joe, on why this is important, why not to call it easy? Why this is important for how we frame the work we're doing in the world of Webflow.
Well, I think there's many levels of building in Webflow. You can put together a website in 2 hours, right? This is possible. You can start from zero and have a finished landing page in 2 hours. That doesn't mean it's a good landing page. That doesn't mean it's a well-built landing page. That doesn't mean it's using all of the best practices. And because of that, people that are building it in 2 hours very quickly, that have no experience, can say, hey, it's easy, but they're not really building it in the right way. And I think that comes from that bubble tweet where you can build a to-do list, but that doesn't mean it is a scalable to-do list, a to-do list that actually does the most efficient process. So us that are using Webflow for so long, we get to this level where we're just so good and we're so quick at it. That doesn't mean it's easy. That means that we just got really good at a really good tool that makes things quicker for us.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, easy is the right word. It makes it easier, but again, that easy is relative, and so just careful how you publicly talk about this stuff, and mostly that discouraging. You know, like I know it's in the early stages that can be like frustrating. So anyway, now we want to spend the rest of the show kind of talking about why, right? It's obviously not easy, right, from a basic level, especially if you're coming without any understanding of the complexity. But we want to talk about why. We want to talk about where it gets complex and how that evolves as you add more, and how even though it gets easier to build the basics in Webflow, it's not easy to then start doing the next level of things, right? As you start understanding more JavaScript, as you want to get more external integrations, as you want to do other things with Webflow, maybe it's easy for you to spin up a project and build the design, but now it's more complex to, write this custom webhook or get it to connect to Zapier with something that doesn't have a raw integration, and you got to pull the API directly through Integromat and do a blah, blah, whatever. Right. And so there's always more complexity you can add to this process. And I think that if we're really going to be taken seriously in this business and in this world as a true visual software developer, rather than just playing with these, cool new toys, that we have to start taking ourselves seriously. And you don't ever hear coders, very rarely you hear coders talk about how easy it is, right? No, it's complicated. What we do is very hard. The programming, the logic, the work, you need to understand. This is why a lot of developers are super, you got big egos. It's because they know how hard it is. And I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we need to run around as no coders and webflowers and just start getting all ego. Oh, I'm so smart because I can do X. But I think we probably shouldn't dismiss it so easily, especially if we want that whole ecosystem to grow and evolve as we go through. And so let's talk a little bit about where that complexity come from. I'm seeing a lot of comments. Is there anything we need to address here, Joe? Have we seen anything coming in?
I have not been looking at the comments. That was very well said. I just agree with everything there. A lot of software developers can't use Webflow. We saw a comment in there that you were showing on the screen. Webflow has its unique complexities. It has a different way of doing things, and sometimes even a different way of thinking.
Anything coming in?
So yeah, this is a really powerful conversation and really important.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think that this skill, the skill of Webflow, will in the future be very, very coveted. It will be something that people really respect.
Yeah.
And I think it is respected now, but we'll see as years go on and on, it's going to be more and more respected.
Well, and a lot of times we take for granted, like if you've been using Webflow for a few years now, you take for granted the fact that you got to learn things as the new features were released, right? So if you were using Webflow 3 years ago and they didn't have all the features they have now, you got to focus strictly on learning, just the basics, just the positioning, just how to bind the data, just how to do the little stuff. Maybe you didn't have Interactions 2.0. Maybe you didn't have e-commerce, right? Maybe you didn't have the ability to do some of these integrations or whatever else is coming, And so as this goes and as the platform gets more and more like robust and they remove some of these limitations that are inherent in it right now, the complexity will continue to increase exponentially. So we're going to take that for granted again, because as those new features come, we just have to learn that one new feature because we already have a baseline Webflow understanding. But that new feature means now a new person has to learn all of the stuff you've already learned plus that new feature. And so every time somebody new comes to Webflow, as things progress, it's going to be that much more difficult. And so, again, just things to think about as this pushes forward. I think we've already settled that Webflow is not easy. So let's skip that and jump into why it's not necessarily easy. Let's jump into the basics here of the rough complexity, which comes to the poll that we're running here, right? The core elements of what makes Webflow complex is the fact that, you know, you have to learn these front end code concepts, right? You need to know the box model, CSS positioning, global styles. Like, you need to understand parent-child relationships. You know, you have to understand how some of this stuff interacts with the page. Maybe even things like CSS specificity now that you're working with client first, which is something you don't have to do inside of a WordPress, a Squarespace, a Wix, whatever it is, right? Those other platforms kind of remove the guardrails, and it's not, you know, like Webflow lets you break the front end. You know, you can't break the front end in a Squarespace. Like, maybe you can make it look a little ugly, or the typography is not perfect, or whatever. You can have some conflicting design things, but the thing's going to work, right? Same thing with a WordPress theme, right? These WordPress themes kind of adapt and shape, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. With Webflow, you have to understand all the nuance of that complexity all the way down, which right off the bat just adds a whole nother level and differentiates it from all those platforms. Any thoughts on that, Joe?
This takes a lot of time. If you remember back to the beginning of your Webflow career, if you didn't have much knowledge in the web world, you were building in Webflow without these pieces of information, without the box model, without CSS positioning. I know when I first went into Webflow, I had no concept of these features, global styles, nothing. Like, if you use these words with me, I would just be blank. I wouldn't know anything. It was months and months and months of training, trial and error to understand what these are. So even that, let's say 1 year of intense training, that's highly valuable. This takes a lot of time. If you can learn the entire concept of box model, the entire concept of CSS, the entire concept of global styles in 2 weeks, then yeah, maybe Webflow would be easy, but that's just not true. We know that. So your time is valuable. That's really important to understand here.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is the other thing, you know, Webflow increases your technical knowledge. When I was working with WordPress, I never really learned. I wanted to learn more. Like, when I was working with WordPress, I had this constant desire to learn about the code that was making this thing work. But it was all hidden, right? And unless you got into the code, and I could see the code, but I was like, I don't want to look at that, you know. And you're kind of like, you can break everything if you go into the code of WordPress again, which makes it a very complicated software. But you know, like, you just don't have these different you just don't have all these different layers of complexity inside of these tools, and I wanted to learn that. Right. And so Webflow has taught me that. Webflow has taught me about front end code. It's taught me about how CSS and HTML, and even though I can't write them semantically, right? Like, you can't enter me in a code editor and I can be like, opening doc script, okay, HTML, blah, blah, open bracket, this, that. Like, that's not me, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't understand these things and I can't do them in a visual way. And this is the revolution. This is literally what sets Webflow apart, is that you're learning the core elements of building on the web. You're just doing it in a visual editor. You're not manually splicing the film footage. You're using Adobe After Effects or Premiere or Final Cut to edit the footage, right? And so it's like that next level of abstraction in this industry that just, and I think that it just can't be overstated. You know, that's the differentiator, right? Like, you don't have to learn these concepts of these other platforms. Therefore, these other platforms are not true competitors in this space because they always are going to handcuff you in that realm. You know, sorry. Soapbox.
Yeah,
I'm
nice.
off the soapbox.
And when you call it easy with these complex concepts, it's going to discourage beginners. It's going to make somebody that's brand new to the platform have this idea that Webflow is easy, that in 2 weeks, I'll be a Webflow user. And although you can do a lot of great things in Webflow in 2 weeks, you can edit your site, you may be able to add a new section if it's set up correctly. You have a lot of power in 2 weeks, but it's not easy. It's just not the full onboarding. So when a beginner gets to that 2 weeks and they're like, whoa, what is this? This isn't easy. They leave.
Yeah.
Instead, we can educate people about how just understanding these concepts, if you can become a pro in this concept, you just learn Webflow Designer, and now you can start a business for yourself. You can go on a road to being a professional Webflow developer.
Yeah. Yeah, and as we talked about how to make money in Webflow a couple episodes ago, the number of types of streams where you can generate revenue inside of this is growing, and it will continue to grow. I want to look at a couple of these comments because Mark Brutus comes in and says, I hate these the snobbery that you see. You're not a real developer unless you hand code your SVG files. Don's Fedora at jaunty angle. I like that. So nice visual there. I get it. Yeah. He's following up to this one, which you made. Some people can visualize the effects of HTML and CSS as they write it. Others need to flip the switches and see the results. True. And I would venture to guess when writing complicated front-end scripts, I was actually talking to a software developer last night, and we were talking about front-end code. And when you're writing like grid spec or flex, you know, like those are things that maybe you can think about. You can, you know, like keep it mentally abstracted while you're writing the code, but you got to be like some Raymmar style prodigy to be able to properly visualize that as you're writing column 1, gutter, blah, blah, you know, like for your grid spec, like you just, and then to think, oh, no, now I need to move this one over here and to just go wrap that in the code and do the, no. So I would venture to guess that folks who are proficient with front-end code, even writing it semantically, will soon be migrating to this platform when they see how easy that is, just like there are no architects that still hand draft their building plans. Like they just don't. They have AutoCAD, they have 3D modeling software, they have other shit they use for this, right? And so, sure, do they like to sketch in their little sketchbook and maybe they put a little rendering for somebody together? Sure, that's your custom code. That's your handwritten code. But when it's time to do business, when it's time to deliver goods for the client, and when it's time to be efficient, you come and use the right tool for the job. Webflow is going to be the right tool for the job when it comes to writing front-end code, period, end of story. So anyway, Joe, any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's one way that people may see Webflow as easy is by using a template, cloning something, and then editing that. This can be seen as simple, easy, because I've changed the colors, I did this, and now I publish it. Now, what happens when you add complexity to this? What happens when you need to completely change something, add a vast new section, create a whole new page, add e-commerce, add custom interactions, add integrations? Now you are thinking, okay, this was easy, but when you add the complexity to the Webflow site, it can scale exponentially in difficulty. Yeah. And that's where we see beautiful Webflow projects. The bar for beautiful Webflow projects continues to rise and rise and rise because of how much complexity people are adding to projects. And soon that's going to be just a requirement in Webflow. And yeah, Raymmar, what do you think about that? Adding complexity to what was a very simple native Webflow website at one point.
It's going to only increase. I mean, think about adding subscriptions and logic and memberships and blah, blah, whatever. And then maybe opening up that API, right? Maybe their API gets a little stronger for the CMS. Maybe they build that component marketplace where now you can have other devs building and adding complexity to this. So now not only do you have to learn Webflow, you have to go learn all these plugins, right? And so WordPress has a certain level of complexity because of that. And we've talked about this a number of times. There's things you can do in WordPress that you can't even think about doing in Webflow right now. Right? And for that reason, WordPress will stay relevant for a long time because it's going to take Webflow some time to catch up and be, feature rich enough to really be considered a replacement for a full stack in a lot of ways, right? And so the complexity is only going to increase. The more stuff you do, the more it's going to increase. And so Andres is saying here, good developers automate code that gets repeated. For example, reusing code for nav or hero sections. Webflow makes this automation very efficient. 100%. Right? So good folks who are playing with these tools and understand the value of optimizing and automating and, making your workflows efficient, find ways to do this with code or other tools, right? Even in those code editors, right? A lot of times you start writing something and the auto generator comes, right? The auto command comes in and you're not necessarily remembering all of the pieces. These things still help. Again, Webflow is just putting this in a visual interface. Anything you see in the comments here, Joe, or any thoughts on that?
Let's continue with other apps, more different applications. Let's take an example in Zapier. In Zapier, you may have 6 different integrations with your Webflow site. We have a form submission, we have a subscribe form submission, we have a something else, we're loading a custom list, whatever. You have all these Zapier integrations. To somebody that knows Zapier, this could be seen as easy, right? Zapier, for people that use Zapier, they make it easier for you. I would even say they make it easy for you for what you're doing, for what you're accomplishing. But if you put somebody in Zapier who's never used Zapier, they're not going to be able to do it. I've seen it. I've tried it. It's almost like blank. How does this work? You need tutorials. You need to understand the little things that happen in Zapier instead of thinking, why can't I see my Webflow form submission here? Because you haven't submitted the form. You only understand that after you've been what's going on for hours and hours and hours. So this takes time.
This is the same thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And last thing with this, I see a lot of people saying, oh, this integration with Webflow is easy because I can use Zapier. Just go back and think about the beginning, what we said in the beginning, that it's relative to your knowledge. And even though a tool like Zapier or Webflow makes this process so much easier, it's just not easy for somebody that doesn't know it.
Yeah. And that's the same thing with Airtable. Like take somebody from like Excel to Airtable and watch them try to use Airtable like Excel and understand that just because it looks similar doesn't mean it functions similarly. And it's a whole different, there's concepts here to abstract. And like, I don't know. It's just, we're beating a dead horse here on the easy part of things, I think. But it really does come down to, your level of skill. And so if it's hard for you now, understand that there is levels that you're going to get to where it does simplify, and then you'll have other things that you beat your head against the wall as you try to figure out. Right. So there's always things to beat your head against the wall when you're in tech. So yeah, don't worry. There's plenty of things to beat your head against the wall here. Joseph Amato is saying he writes his own code with a typewriter. Get on his level. Alicia, templates are great. If you know how to manipulate them, without this knowledge, you'll break the template after making one change.
Right.
I can't tell you how many in my early days I had a buddy. Daniel, I love you. I'm about to put you on blast right now. He's in the Webflow world. I went to No Code Conf with this guy, super talented guy. But when we were first starting out, he would do this, and he'd like call me up, and it'd be like the middle of the night, because we both knew we were working super late. And he's called me up, and he's like, I don't know how to do that. Like I broke something, and he had charged a client for this. He was working on a client project, whatever it was. And so Raymmar comes to the rescue, and it was this type of thing where, yes, if you don't know, if you don't understand, and you think you can just go do something, this is where you could find yourself in trouble. He learned, we taught, it was a teachable moments. That's how you learn, though, is exploring. So I think clonables and templates are great places to learn and explore. And the good thing with this stuff is that you can always create backups, and you can always restore backups, and you can always kind of start over from scratch. And so, yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. You can break some stuff, but it's a great way to learn too. So Michael's saying have to watch out for some of those templates. Some of them are not well structured. 100%. Yeah. Evan is asking, what things can you do in WordPress that you can't do in Webflow? Tons of things, man. Complex e-commerce builds, with lots of variable items, membership sites with different levels of permissions for all the different users with custom permission settings. Things like baked in forums, even commenting systems, that's all baked into the cake because it started as a blogging platform. They have things called like BB Press and BB Forums where you can throw forums and kind of like a social media component to your site that all plays nicely with their CMS and all the stuff that they do. And so lots of things. And not only that, but then you have, it is open source, and there's lots of plugins that ecosystem is super mature. And so there's lots of plugins and functionality, and companies have like for instance, Webflow has a WordPress plugin, right? Lots of big companies have plugins. Maybe in a couple years, all those companies will also have Webflow plugins, but for right now they don't. And so for those things, WordPress still has lots of stuff. That's not to say for like 80% of the sites out there, Webflow is not a replacement. I'm not saying that it's drastic for most people, but these are real things that are out there that you can't just dismiss. Joe, any other things you're seeing in here?
I was, yes. From Tim, I remember an early site I built. I was so pleased. I fixed up a template. Then I was asked, to add a modal pop-up, then I learned a ton of stuff. Yeah, Tim, this is so true. This is just adding that extra thing. And to us, adding a modal pop-up is something easy. We may even be on a sales call and a client says, hey, please add a pop-up. And we say, great, no problem. That's easy. But we've all been where Tim is at one point. If you're a Webflow user, you have that that thought in your head.
Sorry, we just crossed 100.
Nice. Nice.
I figured that
100
word to
people.
the air horn.
Everybody's had this thought, and this is a really great example of how Webflow just isn't easy. You can be a super, super professional developer, and if you go in Webflow, there is a high chance that you will not know how to add a pop-up modal.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, I think this is mess up your plugins. One of the things that WordPress can do that Webflow doesn't. So that is good to point out as well. Evan follows up. Is it possible to create an commenting system in Webflow using Airtable and Vue.js? Sure. There's all sorts of different things. I just mean natively out of the box. Right. So it's not native with the CMS. You can't like reference comments to users, let's say, right? Let's say I had a blog and I wanted to have an authors collection and a users collection. And then the comments were associated to an author's blog articles, but also to the user who made them. And so that I could reference that in a cool way. I think in a few years that will all be possible. Right now, yes. Not. Andrea is saying, I actually think a login member feature is quite feasible in Webflow. If you know how to use Firebase, definitely not no code, but that's possible. Yeah, and there are no code solutions for this as well. What I mean, it's not native, right? It's not native it doesn't have the same visual elements. Like even like a member stack or any of these, like a Firebase even more, it's more technically complex to figure out what you're doing with that. And so I think that just creates hurdles. A lot of people want it, wrapped up in the same thing. And so I don't know, Joe, any thoughts there?
You can do anything. I mean, I think on any platform, you can find a way to make something work. There's just so many options for how to build functionality. So yeah, when I speak of Webflow and I talk about it, I do think in native terms. If there was some native integration, that's... Oh, stopped. Oh, I hate plugins, but I love Finsweet. I read that originally as I hate Finsweet, and I stopped mid-sentence. Thank you, Fresh Movie Trailers. Appreciate that.
Let's see. Ron John is saying something here. As a complete no-coder with no knowledge in Webflow, the community and the tutorials helped me understand the basics, led me to discover the languages needed to build a website. The information is definitely overwhelming. There's so much to learn, but realize at the end of the day, it's just strategy and how we can use these languages. Great. Yeah, exactly. And that's what the community is so good for. This community, I've never seen anything like it. I take it back. I've seen it one other time ever in my life, and it was WordPress. It was literally a decade ago when WordPress was coming out of the gate, when this was like just in the early stages. So I see a lot of that same thing happening here. I see WordPress open doors to people who had never, like, let's say you were an author, right? Let's say you were a blogger, just like some people are designers now finding Webflow. And imagine now you're the writer and you've been writing your whole life. And the only way to get published is to go talk to HarperCollins or Random House or Penguin Publishers or whatever and get a deal to get published, or hand code some crazy site. And there just weren't tools for you to start a blog. And this idea that somebody sitting at home could just tick, 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 and now their words were on this thing that you could go access through a URL, and that it was easy, just like it was to do a Word doc. You could go to your Word doc, tick, 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 you write your article, you put it into the WordPress, and bang, you're on the internet. And now you have a blog. And then people started sharing it. It was like, what? And so this paradigm where it was just the words changed the entire internet, right? What WordPress has done. It was just fucking words. Webflow's talking about everything: visual, video, interactions, Lottie, motion graphics, like everything. And now logic and other things. Imagine that, right? Imagine the power those authors felt 10 years ago, 15 years ago as WordPress came out, and what they've been able to do over the last decade. Think about what designers and creatives who've been beating their heads against the same problem, but at scale, that like there's a lot less writers than there are creatives and designers and digital artists and blah, 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 who are trying to figure out how do they get their art out into the world. Webflow is just demolishing that barrier. And this is just, yeah, it just goes crazy from here. I'm telling you, this is going to get wild.
And for a creative to reach their full potential on Webflow, they need to understand a lot. We've been talking about how much time it requires to learn Webflow to be a true pro at Webflow. We haven't talked about how much there is to learn, how many different options there are to do the same exact thing. To move this over 10 pixels, there's 6 different ways to do that. And how do I decide what way to do that? And there's a comment from Spencer. That's the key. There are so many ways to do something. It creates anxiety when wondering, did I do this the right way? So this, getting back to the easy, there's too many ways to do things. And when you're the beginner, you're probably doing them wrong. So yeah, this is, it's really amazing. And as you learn more and more, you understand how much more there is to learn. Yeah. It's an amazing growing skill that, yeah, as you get more experience, you know less. Yeah. Because you understand how much more there is out there.
There was a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but it was like, as the diameter of your knowledge grows, so does the area of your, like the surface area of your, of the lack of knowledge, right? So it's like the more, obviously, the more you know, the more, the more you understand how little you know. Right, and the more you know, the more you understand why ignorance is bliss. Is like, especially as you get into other issues and you start learning about how the world works. You start like, oh, I wish I didn't know some of that shit. But it's the same kind of thing here, right? The more you know, the easier it's going to get, and there's going to be a ton of stuff to learn as we go. So Rohan's pointing out here, Wizzed is a good way to set up. Where was that? I just lost it. Set up memberships. I just lost the comment. Oh, there it is. Yep. So that's a good reminder. Wizzed is a super cool tool. Let's see, anything else coming in? Still many things to come. Webflow, I hope, support for tables, support for WebP, integrations, user login, GDPR, multi-language. Yeah, of course. Lots of things still to come in this space. That's, again, I think if you look at this whole thing as like a wave of what's coming next, right? This is the next wave, is the visual software development, because software is eating the world is all we've heard for the last decade, right? There's an app for that, all this stuff. So like, if then that was one wave, and now we're about to experience the next wave behind that, which is the visual software, the same thing, except for now everyone can do it. Like, just imagine how much work there is to do, Fernando. So it's not just Webflow that has work to do. And this is why the plugin marketplace becomes so helpful, is that other people can then also jump on and do some of this work. Because Webflow is not going to be able to do everything they need to do to keep up with this over the next few years. They're going to have to rely on the community. They're going to have to rely on folks like Finsweet, folks like you all out there watching this. The folks who want to kind of push the limits of the platform will be the ones filling a lot of these gaps that Fernando is pointing out here.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the difficulty comes, in those gaps, because it's needed. I think it's impossible for Webflow to offer everything themselves. There has to be integrations. There has to be people to fill those gaps. And those gaps are where some of the biggest learning curves of the platform come. Yeah. In the, how do I do user login? How do I do multi-language? Being able to answer those questions and understand that, that's when you start to get to that next level. And those are certainly not easy concepts, but they're used on most sites. Yeah. Right? If you have a business, you're going to hear all of those "it's not possible" in Webflow requests, and you have to know how to deal with those.
Yeah, 100%. Let's see. Alicia is saying, taking HTML and CSS course before starting with Webflow helps a lot. Otherwise, it can be very confusing. Yes, if you get stuck in Webflow, it is oftentimes very useful to go read some CSS documentation, go learn about the concepts of Flexbox, and go learn about the actual concepts themselves before you can play. There was also, I saw, it was interesting, I think the folks at 8020, along with Weglot and some other folks, launched this like template that's like a learning template. And I think we'll see more tools like this evolve, where they're kind of interactive inside of Webflow, teaching and showing how to use some of those other elements. So I would expect a lot of that to come. Like Webflow did something like that with early on the Flexbox game. I don't know if anybody remembers that. That's how I learned some of the Flexbox stuff. And I remember beating my head against that game, the last couple ones. Like just not being able to figure out how to like and this and up and down and side, like, and now I'm sure I could go through and do it no problem. But yeah. Maria.
Beginners shouldn't use position absolute. The fastest way to F everything up in my opinion. Yeah, that's, you see a lot of position absolute in new projects. And that's not good, especially if you're building a site for a client. If you're taking money for that site and it's anything more than a test, it's dangerous to build like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Maria, I can agree with that.
Victoria.
Victoria, as a beginner, you have to work with resilience until you get it right. That's how it's been for me. Yes, Victoria, a beginner, absolutely. You just have to keep trying and trying and trying, even when you fail 100 times. Evan, I'd love to see Finsweet have some tutorials on Wizzed, like how you did with MemberStack. It's been a little in the dark for Wizzed. Evan, we don't have anything for Wiz right now. We've been doing so many products on our side that all of our video resources are tied up into Finsweet focused products. But we do use Wiz. If you have questions about it, you can reach out to us. We can help you.
Yeah. And that's something we could maybe consider for the future. I think maybe you'll...
Yeah, if enough people want to see it, sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Tables has been my biggest issue for clients, migrating large CMS sites with hundreds of articles that have previously supported tables in the WYSIWYG. Yeah. Tables has just been a big limitation in Webflow since the beginning.
I'd love to... Oh, do you have more comments here?
Nope. I mean, okay. There's more, but we can jump wherever you want at this point. I think we're just kind of floating around.
Yeah, I would love to come back to those 3 points that you had in your tweet. I keep thinking about these points throughout this entire episode, and that's why to not call it easy. When you call something easy, it devalues the ecosystem. You are giving negative vibes out about Webflow. Calling something easy just takes it away. If you have a piece of pizza and that piece of pizza is 10 cents and you say it's so cheap, your first thought is, well, what's wrong with the pizza? Why is it only 10 cents? So don't devalue the ecosystem. Tell people that there are things that are easy about it, like using Editor. You can onboard to Editor in a day. You can do this in a week. And to be a pro, maybe you need 2 or 3 years. Number 2, diminish the value of the work that we are doing. This one is so important. If you're getting better, you shouldn't come off as being less valuable. You should be coming off as more valuable. I see this in sales all the time. Oh yeah, this is easy. Webflow is great because it's easy. I can do this because it's easy. If you keep saying that, people aren't going to value what you're doing because it's easy. If it's so easy, then why am I hiring you? Why am I paying you so much money?
Yeah.
So even if it's easy for you, just don't say that. Say it's something I have experience with. It's something that I know how to do.
It also, if you're delivering the site to the client, sets unrealistic expectations for the client, right? Mm-hmm. They think that maybe their marketing person can now just go in and start playing inside of the Webflow designer, and next thing you know, you got to restore a backup because they just ruin everything. And so, yeah, maybe the editor is something that you can talk about how easy it is for the client to make content updates. But when you start talking about how Webflow is easy to tag on, like diminishing the value of the work you're doing, you're going to make it more difficult for you to, first of all, charge the amount of money you should be charging for the high level of work you're creating. And second of all, you're going to set this expectation for the client that they can just go in and change whatever they want because it's easy, right?
Yeah. And I've called our CTO out on this a few times in sales calls. Alex Iglesias, our lead developer, sometimes we'll be on an enterprise sales call and he'll say, yeah, that's easy. And at the end of the call, I'm like, Alex, you have to stop saying this. It's not easy. You're literally the only person on our 45-person team that can do this. Nobody else can do this, so it's not easy. And now I haven't heard easy from him in several calls. He's a pro now. Just don't say it's easy. It's possible. I can do this.
It is possible.
I can make this happen. That's it. It's so much easier to say that word, and it's just more powerful.
Well, and I think that would be the reframing of it, right? Because this is how, instead of discouraging users, because that's the third point here, instead of discouraging users, you could elevate users by shifting the way you frame the conversation by saying, look how amazing, look at what I was able to build. Look at, like the disbelief that you have. Like I still have this, right? When I I remember the first time I was on the WeTransfer website, I saw this cool little cards animation, this card on hover, and I was like, I wonder if I could build that in Webflow. And I did it in like 15 minutes. I lost my shit, right? And I think this is probably one of those moments where I was like, I have to brag about Webflow. Look at this thing and blah, blah, blah. It's still one of the most cloned elements in my site. But framing that about the power it gives you, how much you just accomplished, the abilities that you have now. Now you can start encouraging other folks because I want that power. I want that ability. Sure, I want it to be easy, but I'd much rather have the strength and the knowledge that like I can build anything. Show me something on the internet, I can build it. That's confidence. That's not easy, right? That took a lot of time to get to the point where like I could say, hey, show me that. I could build that interface, right? And so reframe it. Take credit for the thing that you've done, right? For this knowledge that you have. Like own it. Like build value in this. This is how we make our money. This is the ecosystem that we're building. This is like what our future is shaping out to be. And so we want this thing to be presented as like something super valuable. And that's all, you know, that's the point we're trying to make here is that you can reframe the same content in a way that just builds the value as opposed to like, even if it doesn't diminish it, even if it just keeps it flat, right? You're not building the value. You're not creating a little bit more tension or anticipation for wanting to have that same feeling inside of you.
And when you do this, you discourage the beginners. You discourage people that may be interested in the platform. And when you set these unrealistic expectations, they leave. I'm sure there's a lot of people that wanted to learn Webflow and they quit and gave up in the first day or two because they saw a clonable that said, look at this quick and easy Firebase integration. Quick and easy Firebase integration. And they say, I can't do this quick and easy Firebase integration. So we don't want to discourage anybody from using the platform. As more people come into Webflow, Webflow becomes more powerful, you become more powerful, and you become the experienced, right? If 1 million people join Webflow in a few years, now you are the experienced. We want to bring people into this ecosystem. Coming from Jay, I wonder how many times we've said the word easy this stream. I'm going to go back and do an easy word count. Jay, I would really like that. That's going to be a fun fact.
Call out to Gabe as you edit this. You got to like put a little easy counter on the highlights. And then you can put the typing sound effect what people were joking about earlier too. Okay, let's see. Cheesy Toasties. Would Finsweet make their own Webflow version? Not a chance. Not interested. No. Not even anything we're considering. Yeah. Nope. We're just going to, you know, like use the tool they're building and build on top of that. That's, you know, like the reason technologies advance and things advance is because, you know, people and societies can stand on the shoulders of the work that came before them. And so there's no need to like, when people think like, oh, we got to rebuild this from, no, you don't need to, you know, like you just use that and then build something else, you know, or build on to that. And so, yeah, this is kind of the concept we're taking. We have no interest in building anything that's even close to a competitor for Webflow. We're just going to ride this platform and do as much as we can with it and in the ecosystem.
Yeah. Albert, the reality about Webflow is that it is intended to make things easy for clients. For the creators, you still need a learning curve. Webflow is not in the market of easy-to-use development tool. Albert, really love this first sentence. It's intended to make things easy for clients. That's really great. And especially when you compare it to other systems, I absolutely agree with that. It is easy for clients after it is built correctly by a professional.
Yeah. Yeah, using straightforward instead of easy when talking about Webflow editing is better. There's a ton of ways that you can phrase that better. Yeah. Penny just had content run for my new website, had to rein in the writers and my excitement over Webflow to focus on the ease of editing for clients, not the actual building process. Yeah. Well, and it's also too, it's easy for us as developers to get super excited and to start rambling onto the client about things that the client doesn't give a shit about because we're excited about the tool, you know, and you could probably even scare away a client because again, the client doesn't care too much about that. So maybe they like your passion, maybe they appreciate your excitement for the platform. But yeah, and I don't know if this is what Penny intended here, but don't get too lost in selling the client on your excitement about the platform or getting, you know, overwhelmed in that. And this again, just a thought this sparked here, that you distract from what you're trying to sell them or the message you're trying to deliver to them because you're super excited about now your superpowers with Webflow.
From Hans, it's easy to place something on a page. It's hard to put it in the right place. Nice, Hans. Yeah, that's very relatable. We have from Scott, there's always workarounds. That's what I love. Maybe complex, but we all love to problem solve. Yes, and this is a valuable skill. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you are solving problems, it is valuable. And we have one from Tito. I also think that not all profiles are inclined to know code. I know designers who are not interested as well as programmers. So I feel that it is a specific profile. Tito, really nice comment here. That's so true. This is not for everybody. Raymmar, what do you think about this?
I agree. I think that we're seeing it, right? Like a lot of us that are thriving in the Webflow ecosystem were folks who were trying to do and already experimenting with the web in other ways. And that's how we probably found Webflow early, right? The folks that are finding Webflow now are kind of riding the wave of that first generation who I think are the kind of the aspiring makers, right? The folks who want to build software but don't know how yet. And so they've been like diving in technically in a lot of ways over the last few years, and that probably led them to Webflow. And so I agree. I think it's a specific profile. It's still like, it's a designer, it's a creative, but there's a little more technical inclination for the folks who are jumping into the no-code space. But I think as that evolves and that barrier to entry lowers, like imagine as Webflow lets you create symbols, and then those symbols can be attached to the CRM dynamically. You can bind symbols to the CMS. And then, maybe you can create something that looks more like themes inside of Webflow. And now you'll have a whole nother layer of Webflow folks that are just modifying existing themes and layouts and doing some of the basic stuff more surface level. And so I think all this will scale out. I think right now it's like creative plus a little bit of technical. And I think that technical side of things will just start getting lower and lower as more people come onto the scene.
Absolutely agree with that. And I think all the people that are here now, we're building this community, and there will be a point where people look at the 10-year users and say, wow, these people have been with Webflow for so long. Just think of somebody that's been using WordPress for 15 years. That's a lot of time. So you being in this industry, you're here early, you're soon going to be an old school Webflow user in a sense that you've been here forever.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. If you're watching and you haven't hit that like button, we'd appreciate it if you just click a little like on that thing. If you're not subscribed to the channel, look, we've got initiative. We need 10,000 subscribers. We're at, let's see if we got some new subscribers between when we started and now. Okay. Let's take a look at this. If not,
yeah, I see a little bit.
And the YouTube stats are really starting to kind of hit the next level. We've talked about potentially like a public dashboard for some of that. The engagement, it's not just the views that we're excited about, right? Obviously, we're trying to get the subscriber count up. We do like the views, but when we look at the amount of time people are spending with the videos, that's where we get excited. Our average watch time is over 10 minutes. Which is like insane on YouTube. That's just a crazy thing that doesn't happen. And so obviously these topics are, super intricate. They require a lot of time and dedication. To shout out to everyone who's hanging with us. I know a lot of you have been with us for all of the episodes. So whether you're watching it live with us right now or sometime in the future, we appreciate all of you. And shout out to everyone in the crowd that makes all of this possible. So
awesome. Okay. That was a great episode. That was passionate. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of That's personal thoughts about this. And if you're the person that says easy, you can work on it. It may not happen overnight. You may not change this habit overnight, but every time you say easy on a sales call to a friend, to a community, just correct yourself for next time. Say, wait, it's not easy. Next time, don't say that. And you will soon learn to change that word with something a lot more powerful.
Yeah. And call us out if you hear us doing the same thing, damn it, because we're going to make the mistake ourselves.
Yes.
This is something that we're going to constantly have to remind ourselves and to just this is a lesson to all of us. So, we like everything we do on this, like it's usually because we battle tested it and we're coming to talk about it with you all. And so this is something that we face all the time. And we'll continue to work on it with all of you as this whole industry grows. So shout out again to everyone making the effort. Let's see, anything else?
Nice.
Okay.
We have a lot of positive comments. Yeah. Thank you. And join us Thursday. We will be, poll results. Nice.
Colleen. All right. Yeah. And it ended kind of like I expected it to. Box model at 13%, CSS positioning at 22%, global styles and naming at 45%, and then 21% of y'all left a comment about what was the hardest thing. So hopefully we addressed that comment. Hopefully we got to everything. I'm sorry if we missed all your comments. I know we can't always get to everything that runs through, but we do try. So catch us next time.
Nice.
We'll be here Thursday. Again, Figma to client first. I think the show has probably already started, so jump over to Twitter Spaces. That Webflow show is going on right now, and we'll catch you Thursday or next week. Bye, everyone. Okay, we're out.
Nice.
Nice little reminder.